We've already kind of talked about this, but what do you think about games journalism?
At this point, I think that many of these sites and much of traditional games journalism has kind of screwed itself because of controversies like this, and because of their poor reputation for ethics and anti-consumer behavior. YouTubers have largely eaten their lunch, and that's probably a good thing. I have a very negative opinion of traditional print games journalism at this point.
Again, we've also talked about this a bit, but why do you think the Games Press was largely unresponsive to calls for reform?
Because I think they felt they could get away with it. They felt that they were the powerful, entrenched interests, and that if they wielded their media muscle, they could vilify and shut up their critics and not have to meaningfully reform.
Can I go meta for a second? For the
Sure.
book, I prepared a large list of questions, and then I also wanted to delve off into other things as we go based on how the conversation's going. Now, if we talk about a previous element, let's say in an earlier conversation as an aside or as part of an answer to another question, something else comes up. Should I
Okay.
still ask the question again? In regards to asking it later on so that
I
we have like a
mean,
statistical analysis. So go ahead, I'll let you.
I don't think it's necessary if I'm just going to be repeating myself.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it would be good to ask everybody the same questions. That way we could have like a
I mean,
statistical like analysis of like, okay, here's like how everybody answered this one specific question. We've got like,
I'll do it like that if you want. I'm fine with doing it like that, and you can sort of, you know, piece it together how you want. I trust that you're going to be fair.
thanks. Well, I wanted to do was publish people's like direct, just the transcript basically, right? Um, interview. That's what I was thinking. With maybe like an opening, like chapter by me and a closing chapter by me, like summarizing my thoughts on it from the interviews. But I mean, I'm open to actually. I think the transcript idea is good because I want people's like raw stories to be told. But I do feel like if we've already covered a topic in a question, I feel like skipping that question when it comes on the list is probably fine.
Whatever. As far as I'm concerned, you've been being a tough but fair interviewer. You really called me on the carpet about that "it's okay when we do it" thing, and I hope I answered that one well.
Well,
It's a fair question.
I'm not
It's
going
a
to tell
fair
you how you're doing mid-interview. I'll tell you after.
but that was one of the tougher ones.
All right. What kind of reforms would you like to see happen?
Well, like I said, I would have really liked to see a clear delineation established between reporting and op-ed. And in the reporting, for them to really strive for objectivity and, to what degree is humanly possible, to keep personal and political biases out of it. And obviously, another thing that would have been important, and that to an extent we did get, would be a lot more disclosure when it comes to things like personal biases, personal relationships, conflicts of interest, things like that.
If you were the editor-in-chief of a gaming website and some of your employees were credibly accused of ethical violations, what would you have done?
It would depend on a few things. It would depend how serious the violations were, and it would depend if these particular employees were repeat offenders. Obviously, I would have to conduct an internal investigation and determine if the accusations were accurate. If they were, then my publication would have to issue an apology and possibly retract some already printed stories. If the employees were first-time offenders, they would probably be disciplined internally. But if they'd done the same thing repeatedly, I would likely have to let them go.
You've already talked about how games journalism has been in part supplanted by the video format, essentially. But do you think that there's still a role for good games journalism in the world?
I doubt it. I think that these websites have burned so much credibility and also just become in many ways an inferior format to video content, and that they're not going to survive, that there just aren't enough clicks to go around to keep large publications in business without them having to resort to the kind of cheap and unethical clickbait that makes them worthless. I think that video format content and streaming content is the future.
So
Hell, I think it's the present.
Do you not think that there's any room in this sort of gaming world for long-form written content?
As a business? I mean, obviously, there's always going to be room for people to express their opinions on their blogs. But in terms of, big business corporate masthead journalism, I'm not sure there's enough clicks to go around to really support that ecosystem like there was even 10, let alone 20 years ago.
In the first few weeks of GamerGate, it was revealed that nearly 150 games journalists from competing publications were on a mailing group called Game Journo Pros. What did you think of this revelation?
Well, I wasn't surprised. Mailing lists like this had been uncovered before, such as the Journo list in political journalism. This kind of collusion was not unprecedented, and after seeing all those Gamers Are Dead articles, I suspected that there was probably collusion of this or a similar nature going on. It was widely speculated on. The Games Journo Pros reveal mostly confirmed what a lot of people already suspected.
In August 2015, Michael Koretsky, a regional director for the Society of Professional Journalists, hosted the SPJ Airplay conference. The idea of the conference was to have journalistic ethics experts and game developers meet with GamerGate supporters to discuss their concerns about games journalism and the way the media covered GamerGate. The second half of the conference was interrupted by terrorist bomb threats, forcing the convention center to be evacuated. Do you have any thoughts on this event?
Well, first of all, one thing that I would like to say is that I don't think that the bomb threat incident there can reasonably be described as terrorism. It was never credible. There was no bomb. Nobody believed that there was a bomb. The people doing it didn't believe that we would believe that there was a bomb. It was a disruption tactic, not something done to try to frighten people. It was essentially the equivalent of pulling a fire alarm. Just a way to activate the way that the system responds reliably to certain perceived dangers and is basically required to evacuate a building. Everybody was outside the convention center laughing and joking and continuing to have fun and to discuss the issues and things like that. They weren't terrified that it was about to blow up. The intent of that was to troll and to disrupt. It was not 9/11.
Do you think it was more? Oh, go ahead.
I remember during GamerGate, a lot of stuff that we did was falsely likened to terrorism and to things like that. And it was always hyperbole then, and I think we have to be equally fair to the other side. And whoever did that was just an asshole troll. They weren't Osama bin Laden.
Okay, well, let's go meta for a second. Was using the word terroristic loaded language I should take out?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, I'll take it out.
I don't think there was ever a real danger, or that anyone believed there was a real danger.
Obviously, I'll include it for when I asked you, but like for future interviews, I'll probably try to avoid that unless I accidentally slip and say it because it was part of the old script.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm gonna
describing that as terrorism is a little far. It was the equivalent of pulling a fire alarm.
But back in character for a second, or for the interview, do you think that this was likely trolls and not people opposing GamerGate?
It could have been either, but I think that the intent behind it was to disrupt the meeting, to annoy us. It wasn't to leave anyone in fear for their lives.
Why do you think the convention center ordered the evacuation?
I think that's just standard protocol if they get any kind of bomb threat or anything similar.
Why do you think
just like when a fire alarm is pulled, there's almost always an evacuation.
Why do you think the media largely didn't cover SPJ Airplay?
Well, I do want to get back to what I thought of the event itself, not just
please do.
The bomb threat. I thought that the event was in itself a very good idea, and that the morning panel was very informed and very reasonable, and probably got a lot of good done. But the afternoon panel was not going as well, because GamerGaters ourselves had made a really terrible mistake. We chose the absolute wrong person to send to that event. Someone we never should have allied with, who did not have GamerGate's best interest or gaming's best interest at heart, and was not acting in good faith. A man named Milo Yiannopolous, who was a conservative activist and political provocateur who had serious ulterior motives to co-opt GamerGate towards totally unrelated conservative political ends. And because for a lot of us, this was our first experience with serious activism, and we didn't know all the ins and outs of how to vet people and stuff, we trusted him when we really shouldn't have. And he was kind of making a clown of himself at that event, and in many ways, the people who called in that bomb threat were kind of saving us from a significant embarrassment, and might have unintentionally done us a favor.
Yeah, I mean, I condemned Milo too.
I went along with him for a while. I went along with him for a while because I honestly thought he was joking. when he would say stuff like that he wanted to raise funds to send a particular GamerGate opponent a gold-plated dildo, I assumed that that was a joke because it sounded too insane to be serious. But ultimately, he would reveal that he seriously believed some things that were that insane or more insane. And we should have recognized a lot earlier than we did that this was a mentally unstable attention whore.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people did recognize that he was.
Yeah, but when people feel like they're being vilified by everyone and someone appears to reach out their hand in friendship, most will take it and not know better. At least not until it isn't too late.
Some anti-Gamergate people might hear our conversation about this interview about this, your thoughts about this, about Milo. This guy who obviously ended up being like one of the worst actors, I guess you could say. And say, well, look, your movement was bad because you let this guy speak at Airplay, and some people supported him early on before he was widely condemned later.
I would say that they live in glass houses and shouldn't throw stones. I would say that one of their most prominent figures, and arguably one of the people whose actions most directly contributed to Gamergate, ultimately engaged in an incident of cancel culture wherein she so completely ruined a man's life that he died by suicide. You want to talk about bad actors? Someone like that is a worse actor than even Milo. A number of anti-Gamergate figures have been arrested for sexual harassment, sexual assault, or possession of child pornography in the years since Gamergate. There have been people on both sides who turned out to be awful human beings. And I don't think that either side should face guilt by association tactics because of that. If anti-Gamergaters want to say, "We told you so" about Milo, yeah, they did tell us so. And we should have listened. And to anybody saying, "I told you so," yeah, I'm sorry. But that doesn't mean we're all like Milo. Just like it doesn't mean that they're all responsible for a man's suicide.
Do you want to talk about why SPJ Airplay didn't get more coverage?
Well, why would these media institutions cover their own critics and their own failures? They didn't cover it out of self-interest.
I mean, the SPJ hosted the event, though.
They did, but the people who would be covering this gaming-related news, for the most part, would be the gaming journalism sites. And they were the topics of most of the criticism there.
Off topic, I do want to nerd out on this for a second. Do you remember when Polygon actually covered SPJ Airplay fairly, and like everyone was blown away, and the journalist who wrote the article got a ton of flack from anti-Gamergate people?
I vaguely remember it.
I reached out to him because I thought he'd be a good faith person to talk with, but I don't think he ever replied. I'm sorry. I was reminded of this incident, and I'm like, oh my gosh! Like I remember, like this was like. Anyway, I'm
He was
not going to bug
probably
the course. Or maybe it's just
getting so much crap from his own team that he just wanted to go hide under the bed and not make it worse for himself.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he seemed like he was fair-minded, right? I mean, the way he approached it. I mean, I don't know if
Every
he's on his
once in a
side.
while
We
they
shouldn't assume
were.
people are on sides, right? We
I
should
mean
treat
these
people as
these
individuals.
these people were not Hannibal Lecter for the most part. You know, they had their biases and sometimes they were assholes, but they weren't all a bunch of monstrous psychopaths. They tried to be fair sometimes.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
And
maybe I shouldn't put that in the book. I don't even know if it was a Polygon guy. I think it was a Polygon guy. I'm pretty
well,
sure it was a Polygon guy.
if you find who it was specifically, it would probably be an interesting note, and a sort of asterisk bit that, just in fairness, some of them did cover it.
True. True.
Don't tar with a broad brush when they weren't all guilty.